guys, it's Sasha, and today I am going to be doing a full spoiler-free review of Goddess in the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson. Okay, so Goddess in the Machine is essentially a sci-fi novel through and through. This is essentially about a girl named Andra who is put into a cryonic sleep with her family to wake up 100 years on this new planet called Holy, and they're colonizing that planet. So Andra ends up waking up. However, she ends up waking up 1,000 years later instead of 100 years later. So she is now trying to figure out why she woke up 1,000 years later. And also there's another element where the people on this planet are calling her a goddess, and they're telling her that she can save the planet that is dying. So she is literally like, what? And she's trying to figure out why she was the only one who woke up 1,000 years later. And that's essentially all you really need to know about the story to get an idea as to what it is about. I ended up giving this 4.5 out of 5 stars, and that is so rare for me with sci-fi because sci-fi and I just aren't very good friends. I don't know. Go straight into content warnings. This is a very violent story, and it starts very early on. And if that's not something that is okay for you to read, I definitely don't suggest this story because there is gore, there is violence, and it starts literally maybe 20 pages or less in, so we get a pretty good idea of what's to come very early into the story, and I liked that. I'm also going to put a content warning for death as well because there's a lot of death within this story, and I know that is kind of to be expected in a sci-fi or a fantasy type story. However, I do like to just put it out there just in case it's something that people don't really love. There is death, and it is in quite vivid and gruesome detail, so keep that in mind. In terms of representation, we do have a fat main character, which is so exciting, and I didn't know that going into this, and I love that because I've read about a few fat main characters this month, and I love that so much. So yes, and she is also half South Asian, so that was also something to make note of. And there are also a few other POC characters within this story. There aren't really any members of the LGBT community that we are made aware of. However, it is kind of mentioned very subtly that one of our characters finds everybody attractive. So I don't know if that's like hinting at something, or I don't know. We'll see. But yes, I'm sure there's room for that to develop further in the story, but that's just what I noticed for this story. So I'm going to start with the plot. So for me, waking up early or late from a cryonic sleep is something that I vibe with so hard. I've not read a lot of books like that. The only book I can really think of is Across the Universe by Beth, which I read in junior high and I literally fell in love with. And I think that kind of got me started in it. But that is a trope that I can 100% get behind in every single sci-fi story that I read. I love it. I find it really fascinating. I like to see where society is. I like to see things that have changed. I don't like sci-fi with aliens. Like, this sci-fi is the shit I love. And then we add on that this main character, Andra, is thought to be a goddess. And that is so spicy. Like, I was so excited. How could you not want to read that? I loved the plot of this story. I loved the ideas that Laura Beth Johnson decided to incorporate within the story. It did feel very reminiscent of a lot of YA tropes that you can find in a lot of stories. There is like the awkward main character, the chosen one, like stuff like that. Very, very reminiscent. However, there were so many different twists and turns that just kept us on our toes the whole time that the plot didn't feel overused and it felt original compared to other stories, and I really liked that. The plot twists were out of this world. Get it? Because it's a sci-fi? Okay, anyway, why am I like this? In terms of pacing, this was a very slow start for me. And there were a lot of points where I was just like, I don't want to finish this. I'm tired of reading sci-fi. This is why I don't pick up sci-fi. I hate this so much. And I didn't hate it. I guess it wasn't my style at the beginning, which made it very slow. And I know a lot of other readers felt the same way, that it did start off pretty slow. But during the second half, it picked up so much and it became such a fast-paced story. And I just wanted to know what was happening at all times. I was just so invested in it. So it definitely was worth it for that second half to get there, but it took some trudging and I didn't really feel like picking it up a lot of the time. But once I hit the first big plot twist, I was hooked immediately. So I'm going to talk about characters. Andra, who is our main character, is extremely relatable. She just kind of has to take a step back and be like, what the fuck is my life? What happened? How did we get here? And I think that's really fun in main characters when they actually seem relatable and they're actually just like, hold on, what? Also, it didn't take her like a day or a week to adjust to this new climate where a lot of main characters in YA, it takes them very little amount of time to be like, oh, I'm now the queen, like cool. Or I am now this goddess, cool. Like I can use that. No, she was just like, hold on. And that was so relatable. And I really liked her as a main character. I thought she was really enjoyable to read about. And just going through her journey with her, it felt real. Like it felt like a real person going through a very, very tricky situation. And I really liked that. Zaid, who is the other main character, I don't really know how I feel about him, and I think that's the intention because we go through so many different facades of Zaid. It's like the man with many faces. At first we're like, oh, he's nice, and then we're like, damn, he's a freaking asshole, and then it's just like, oh my god, like a bean, a love, 10 out of 10, would hug, and then it's just like, what happened? Like there's so many different sides. I love that about him, but I also don't know how I feel about him. I'm still on the fence. I'm hoping in book 2 it develops a little bit further so that I kind of can get a very real opinion about him in my wee little brain. But I don't have one yet, so that's that. All of these side characters were so much fun to read about. There are even ones that like we're not supposed to like, but I still really liked reading about them because I thought they were interesting and they were really well crafted. But there were a few characters that I had not enough time of, and I loved them. Like they should have had all the book time. Like where is my book about Lou? Where is my book about Lilibet? Like I need things. I also loved the banter between Zaid and Andra because there were a lot of moments where, like I said, he goes from being like Bean to bitch to Bean again. Like it goes back and forth, and so the banter was really it was reminiscent of that. And there were a lot of times where like, well, I don't hate you as much as I hate other people, and it's just like, yeah, that's so 13-year-old edgy, but I liked it. I was just like, yes, you don't hate him as much as other people, thank you. I'm a softie for like not that whole like mushy gushy, like I love you so much, I just want to like marry you and lay you down and give you a smooch. I hate that. I'm just like, play around, be witty, be funny, like, because that's just what I like in relationships. Authenticity. So was it the same as the back of the book suggests? Yeah, it is pretty much exactly how the back of the book suggests, and so much more. So if you're going into this going solely on synopsis and not on reviews, know that you're going to get that, but it's going to be so much more, but in the best possible way. At least for me. Now let's talk about the world, because the world is one of the most important parts of the story, and this is where a lot of people took stars away. So I'm gonna give you my take on the matter. This is a world that you can tell meant a lot to the author. She put her heart and soul and research into this world, and I really appreciated that, and I could tell by reading it. Like I could tell that she did all the homework for this story that she could possibly have done, and I loved that so much, and I felt so happy to read it because it felt like it was so important to the person who created it. And I think that's so important when reading any sort of fantasy or sci-fi story. So I loved that. I loved the way she crafted this world because it was almost like society had moved back in time to the point where technology was so advanced that people thought it was magical. And I thought that was a really interesting take on this because all of the time when we think about the future, people would think that like technology is so advanced and we're all so advanced. And that was the case in Andra's time. Everybody was so advanced. They all had these neural implants and everybody was so into science and technology, but the world kind of regressed. And I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was such an interesting take, and not a take that we see enough, because it felt like I was reading almost like a historical fiction, but it was set in like 3102, which was insane because it's just like, that's so far ahead, but they're so far behind. And it was so fascinating, and I loved that. Now this is where the author gets a lot of scrutiny. The ones who rated it low don't think it's as good because of the dialect. Because essentially our author decided to create a dialect for English in the future. So what English would look like in 1,000 years, what English evolved to be. And I personally hated it at first. I was just like, what is going on? I think that's why it was so slow at first for me, because I was trying to piece together what these people were saying, and it got very annoying. Like instead of using any word that had like finally or mostly or eventually, it would be mostish or eventualish or finalish. Like it was very annoying at first. However, after reflecting and after getting further into the story and understanding a little bit more what was going on, I loved it. And I thought it was really clever, and I thought it was just another added icing on the the cake type of situation where we got so much of a world, yet Laura Beth Johnson decided to give us this extra layer of this world, and I thought that was a fantastic element. And you either are going to love it or hate it. If it bothers you to read this different language where things are spelled differently and don't sound the same, then you're not gonna like this book, and I wouldn't recommend picking it up because there are whole chapters where they talk pretty much exclusively like that, and I think that's fine. Like, for me, it worked. For others, it's not going to, but don't pick this book up if you think it won't work for you, because at the end of the day, like, you're probably gonna rate it lower because of that, and I'm warning you. So don't go after Laura Beth Johnson because she wrote a top tier book and you just can't handle the language element. But to be fair, I've never studied a single thing of linguistics, so this could make absolutely no sense, and people who've actually studied linguistics could probably be like, bitch, But for me and my simple mind, this worked. It worked so well. Next, let's talk about her writing. So this, I would say, is a very plot-based story. Like, yes, we do get characters and they do get fleshed out, but the plot is the main focus. And for a lot of stories, that doesn't work for me, but for this one, it really did, because I feel like I was so invested in the plot and I was so invested in what was going to happen. And I just loved Laura Beth Johnson's writing style. I thought her writing was so good. It was so spot on. You could not tell that this was a debut novel because she wrote with a sophistication that I really loved. So for me, this was just top tier. The writing was top tier, and she was able to write very relatable people into the story, and I loved that. Next, we have the ending. So did it end up going where I wanted it to go? And to answer your question, I don't know. Going into this, I don't think I had any expectations for the ending because sci-fi is not a genre I read, and I have not read a cryonic sci-fi novel since Across the Universe. So my expectations and my ideas of what were going to happen were non-existent. I had no idea what was going to happen. I had no expectations. I had no ideas as to what I would want to happen versus what would actually happen. Like, I had nothing. And I'll just go and say that the ending definitely didn't disappoint me. It was phenomenal. It was exactly what we needed for the ending in the best way. Like, it was so good. It was a really good ending. So did it go where I wanted? I don't know, because I didn't have any idea as to what I wanted. But did it blow my mind? Absolutely. And I'm so excited to pick up the second book when it comes out. Like, they don't even have a release date for it. There's no title. There's nothing. So I only have one last thing to say, and that is from the publisher and not actually the person who wrote the story, the author. Why did I have a whole moment? But essentially, when you look at this character, you don't actually see a plus-sized character on the front of this. You might see a character that has like some curves and maybe like slightly bigger than other people, but for a character who is mentioned as being fat, you don't get that from this. And I just wish publishers would put people on the cover who were like reminiscent of who the character is supposed to be. I feel like publishers are like, well, fat won't sell, so we're gonna put maybe like thick. But I don't know. I didn't personally think that was a great touch on the publisher's part, and I would have liked to see like an actual fat main character, because going into this and they were like, yeah, her clothes are too tight, and I was like, good for her. And then they actually mentioned that she was a fat character, and I was like, well, that would have been cool to know going into this, because that could make a lot of people actually like pick up the story more to see more representation of their self within the story. So it would have been nice to have that a little clearer for us as readers. That's all I have to say about the story. Let me know in the comments below if you've read it, and if not, why? Go read this. Go to your library, put a hold in, and just read this book because it's good. If you did, let's chit chat about it, because your girl needs to talk to somebody, because I'm just like bursting here and I don't love it. But yes, do that, please. And as always, please like, comment, and subscribe for more content. I do post twice a week. Until next time, bye readers!